Alrighty, we are hereby live, and right now we are doing astronomical activity. Toward that end, we have my backyard camera pointing at the telescope, and I would just like to take a second to update my Stream Deck panel so that I can, switch between angles at the touch of a button. I almost forgot to do that. And luckily, it's very trivial to do that. We can literally copy and paste an existing action and rename it, ACU cam, whatever. Just give it any name. And there we go. And we just got all done. So now, when I press this button, we can see the imaging software. Now we're gonna just for a minute eliminate the reticle. Yeah, let's eliminate the reticle altogether. And what we're looking at here is basically 3 galaxies. M106 is in the center, or was in the center of our frame, and it's not looking all that great, but it's there. We could totally see it. You got a little guy here, a little guy over here. And so far I've taken almost 13 images, which is how many pictures I took in blue. And so right now down here we can see the blue filter. We're currently on the green filter, and although it's not, the screen is not green, we did indeed use a green filter because, we do this in monochrome. And then we turn these colors into shades of green. So instead of black and white, we do black and green, black and blue, black and red. And combine all 3, with your colors combined, you get actual color. Now it does look like we did get a bit of moisture or haziness in the atmosphere, and we can even try that. Looks a little better. Hopefully we could do something similar in post. Now, I chose these targets today based on their magnitude. And so what I did was I decided to give this another shot where I manually select a lower magnitude, or a higher magnitude actually. So a lower number means more light, a brighter object. And so we, decided to limit our magnitudes to 9.2. In fact, some of the objects on our screen might not even be listed because of the limitation. And it should be noted that although we are actually centered on this guy here, the software and the mount thinks we're aiming here, and that is due to a couple of factors. The mechanisms are so low grade, so entry grade on this mount, and the mount being the thingamajig, this whole rig over here. So in the center of the frame, which I don't currently have a mouse pointer on that. Let me see if I can light that up with a mouse pointer. There we go. Okay, so this is our mount, this unit right here, this head unit, so to speak. And the job of a mount is to, rotate with the Earth. So as the Earth is rotating, it's going to keep this aimed at whatever target by going from east to west. Just like how the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Every star is doing the same thing, and this is designed to do that. Also, in theory, if everything is polar aligned perfectly, this top part here, which is on a separate axis, does not have to move in order to follow objects. As the Earth rotates, only this part in the middle needs to rotate. In reality, due to the ground soil sinking a little bit, polar alignment is going to get lost a little bit, and you are going to get a little bit of drift. And so we do use this little guy up here, this piggyback scope, this guide scope or auto guider, to basically keep track of variances, to tell them, excuse me, I belched, to tell the mount to make corrective pulses. And we can see that by observing what's going on here. And we can even see that it is pulling north or pulling south. So this is indeed indicating that the mechanisms are mostly working surprisingly well. Wait, whoops, I'm sorry. I forgot to hit the button. As I was saying, this program here is our auto guiding software. So basically this is what the guide scope is, feeding data to. And so we got a few visible stars here. These are coming through the little scope on the top of my main scope. And that guide scope has a little camera behind it. The image from that camera is what's giving us these points of light. There's an ant walking on my microphone. Hey buddy, get the hell out of here. Whatever. Oh, he's on my hand now. They're strong. Anywho, we get these points of light. We click on one. I've already clicked on one. I picked up. Come on. Fucking. Part of my language. Ant crawled on my bicep. Anyway, we click on a point of light. It comes up in the top right corner here. We get sort of like a profile view of that star. So essentially the edges of this represents the star getting dimmer, and then the middle is the peak, the brightest part of that star. And this program can calculate or determine a centroid, which is like a mathematical thingy. And if the centroid moves in one direction or another, based on some of my settings, it knows how many steps to tell the motor to compensate. It tells the motor, hey, you gotta go north, hey, you gotta go west. And interestingly, we do see periodically that it's moving from east to west a little too quickly. So these blue lines show that it's pulling east to slow it down. But overall, I think it's behaving quite well. The issue is whenever I aim at an object, especially if I start from the parked position, whenever I aim at an object, it never really lands on it. This reticle will land on the object, but the actual scope won't be pointing at the object. And thank goodness I was able to get plate solving to work. And basically plate solving is where you take a picture, and based on the constellations, it can figure out, basically based on the patterns of the stars, the points of light. There's obviously points of light in various patterns here that can be matched up with a star map. It's able to superimpose known object names. So for example, M106, that's the galaxy we're looking at now. Originally, we were not centered on M106. And even though we can't actually see M106 in this picture, that doesn't really matter, because if you have a star map and the computer can, compare these points of light to a real star map, then we know that, if this is here and this is here and these are known objects, then we know this has to be here. That is basically what it comes down to. And if you pardon me for just a moment, I want to make sure that my stream is actually running, because I'm getting contradictory signs out of my applications here. And yeah, it looks like we do. Yeah, it's working. All right, good. Just wanted to be sure. Wouldn't want to be talking to myself for too long now. And I inadvertently stumbled on 1980s arcade footage. I'm going to bookmark that for maybe a reactionary video. So getting back to here, that's what plate solving does. We take a picture, it sees the constellations, points of light, compares it to a known star map, and boom, it can circle, the positions of the galaxy. So for example, we have M106 circled here, we have it here, and that is what we're imaging in the imaging software over here. And I want to give greetings to Mr. Stephen Ransom. How do you do, good sir? It's good to see you, Stephen. If I was rigged for multi-person streaming, I would invite you on. I really got to do that. I got to, get into the habit of maintaining a schedule of some kind, but also using, something that I can get people on. And that's mainly because I couldn't get the holiday special discount on Restream, and so I've been, you know, kind of like reluctant to use anything. Like, I want 1080p when I'm streaming. I want 1080p at 60 frames a second so that I can play a video game and invite people on to chit chat. But otherwise, you know, I can get 1080p 60 with solo, when I'm solo, not with solo. I don't invite, you know, Han Solo over. He's, you know, busy. But yeah, so we got 3 galaxies here. We got M106 in the center of this frame. And at the bottom of the frame, we got 2 more galaxies. If I was really, really ambitious, I maybe would have centered it in such a way that these guys would have been, you know, higher up. But I figured maybe I get a long exposure and get a better picture of M106. Now, of course, we're only looking at one sub exposure. And that is basically where we, you know, take a shit picture. But if you combine a lot of shitty pictures together, you get more dynamic range, you get more contrast, and we're doing it in monochrome because a black and white camera is way more sensitive than, you know, a color camera. At least, you know, it's gonna collect more photons, or how should I phrase it? A black and white image sensor dedicates every single pixel to whatever you're trying to image at that instant, whereas a color camera has to divide, has like actually, this is the way to put it. So every color camera actually has a black and white image sensor in it. But in front of the pixels is a grid or a matrix called the Bayer matrix. And basically, it's got red, green, and blue color filters in front of individual pixels. So if, let's say, a photon lands on one of the pixels that has a red filter in front of it, the only photons that will get exposed are the red photons, and anything like, say, a blue photon lands on a red pixel, it's going to get filtered out. So you waste that blue photon. But we do this because, you know, it's convenient, and if you have a lot of light, it doesn't really matter if you waste photons. The camera's firmware, the software built into the camera, will ultimately, you know, process the image right after you take the picture to give us that color image. But it's really being generated by separate filtered pixels. When we do astronomy even on the Hubble Space Telescope, and I can even get a picture of a filter wheel on one, they use a filter wheel. So actually this is a filter wheel that is similar to what I'm using, and this is the filter wheel on the James Webb Space Telescope. And basically you got red, green, and blue filters in there. And then you also have some other stuff there. You got hydrogen alpha. You got ionized hydrogen, which is hydrogen alpha. You got ionized oxygen. Basically, every star, like our sun, emits hydrogen alpha. And that's basically plasma, electrically charged gas. So if you use a hydrogen alpha filter, it'll basically block out every undesirable wavelength of light. It'll block out every bit of light pollution. So, for example, even down here, like this picture has HB. Let's see, we got O3, HA. Somewhere in here, okay, this one doesn't show us the actual wavelength, but sometimes you'll actually see them superimpose. Sodium lights are under the orangey red area, for example. So, street lights at a high pressure sodium, and then somewhere in the blue-green area, you'll have the mercury vapor lights, and I think that's actually near the HB, but that's hydrogen beta, I believe. But anyway, you get like street lights here and here. So there's like blue, white parking lot lights are usually going to be here, and those orange street lights, the old-fashioned ones, not, you know, oldish ones, are here. And so if I'm shooting in hydrogen alpha, I'm going to get a ruby red color, but I'm going to be blocking everything else so that I don't get any light pollution. Right now, however, we are in the broadband green area. So we're actually getting an area that goes between like, I don't know, like 4 something and 5 something. So it's a pretty wide chunk of the spectrum. And that does mean we are prone to light pollution. It means that we are prone to sky glow. It means that, yeah, if, you know, the moon was out, I would be having a hell of a bad time right now. But luckily, the moon is not out. And I think we'll let it take one more picture in green before I switch to the next filter. But in the meantime, I wanted to inspect some of the raw data from earlier, because I do have some pretty good raw data. And in particular, we have something in all three colors together where we used a what we call a luminance filter, and use that as like sort of like a layer to like brighten up all of the other layers. I mean, there's more to it, but that's like my oversimplified explanation of that. I'm gonna do log X, maybe? Yeah, why not? Who cares? Let's see what happens. Yeah, that didn't change a lot. But essentially, we're using a histogram to sort of stretch it out. To say, I want to exclude a bunch of pixels, or I want to exclude a group of pixels, or I want to include a group of pixels to brighten something up. And sometimes it can be a little tricky. Let's see if we got those galaxies in the corner. That's a big image. Had fun on Floral Show today. It was good to see you on Floral from Under a Rock, by the way, Steven. Yeah, I tune in while starting up my telescope, and I go, oh shoot, not only is this dude on Floral Show, but they got a StreamYard link. I was like, hell yeah. So I was like, I gotta get up on it, and I'm glad I got in on time. And what I love is a show like his, he keeps the schedule, he keeps it down to an hour. So it's like I had my takeout order coming in, and it was like the show, no sooner than the show being over, my food arrives right after. That was perfect. I didn't feel like, obligated to stay on. Not that I feel obligated, I just don't want to like, jump off abruptly, So yeah, this is space, the final frontier, unless of course it's our first frontier. Maybe we've been there already, and we've all been memory wiped. But it's good to see you, Mr. Crit of Everest Productions. And, it's weird. This picture, I cannot see the second galaxy. So, just for reference, we have, like, a spot here and a spot here in addition to M106. And if we need to see what M106 is supposed to look like, well, that's one example right there. This would be like if I had my high magnification telescope up, this might be what I would see. I mean, it wouldn't be what I would see, but we'd see something more like this. This red box represents the seeing area, the imaging square of my current camera on my current telescope. And so, galaxy season is a little tricky for me because on my current scope, everything is a bit small. Galaxies tend to be small because of their distance, but I chose this telescope compared to my high magnification scope because it's a lot more forgiving, and frankly, it's a good thing I have it now because the auto guiding, which is basically using a piggybacked telescope. We have a little telescope on top of my big scope. That is my guiding camera, my guide scope. We have the camera on the back of that. And basically we take a picture in this application and we pick a star. It generates a peak. The center of the peak represents the brightest part of that star. It's almost like a cross section. And we're able to lock onto that target. And as that star moves left or right, or north or south, this program can send corrective pulses to, to the mount, which once again is the big white guy over here. Big white guy, that's a way to put it. And you can see it's, got a 41-degree angle. And so if you look at this picture and you wanted to stalk me, at least determine my latitude. And I guess you could probably even locate me based on my latitude, and by knowing that my telescope is pointing here and that I've stated that I'm pointing at M106, I'm sure there's a way to then extrapolate based on the angle of everything here right now that I live in New York, or a certain part of New York, because of course, not all of New York is on the 41-degree latitude line. In fact, I narrowed it down very significantly just now, but I don't really care. So there's actually a little camera on the front of this scope here, and on the front of this mount, and this part is actually the part that goes from east to west. So as the Earth rotates, just as the sun rises and sets, all of the objects in the sky rise and set because of the Earth's rotation. And if we point this in the northern sky, we can polar align this mount, and that's really important because otherwise things start to drift diagonally. And in fact, the ground got wet during multiple rainy days, and so yeah, I'm sure the polar alignment is a little bit off, and that's part of the reason we have auto guiding. But I'm very, very saddened because at some sad point in time, I'm going to have to take apart this mount and clean it, lubricate it, something, change the belts. I got to do a proper overhaul on the mount, to be honest, which sucks, but it's got to be done, and I'm hoping that it'll act more precisely like when it was new once I do that. So I gotta say, it's a great mount for the price. It is like the best mount you can get for the price, and it probably took a little more wear from being outside, but I suspect if I had to take it apart every night and bring it inside, it would also take more wear and tear. So it's like, you know, that saying about the dozen or whatever, half a dozen, whatever. But this thing has been out year round since I got it, or almost since I got it. I did spend almost a year not leaving it outside, but once I got the proper outdoor cover, I started keeping it outside because it's just easier than taking apart the mount. I mean, this whole thing is like 20 pounds right here, 15, 20 pounds for this part here. This part's like 45 pounds for this shit over here. You know, so I'm not trying to move all that crap around, plus the two 11-pound counterweights. Not trying to lift all that crap. So instead, and plus, when you take down the scope, usually you can't leave all the camera, the payload attached to the back. So every time you put all the crap back on, especially you put this on the rail, you put this on its own rail, you gotta balance it. You gotta balance the weight, man. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not about that every freaking night. So anyway, getting back on to here, we got a crummy picture. Now, I thought about a couple options here. If I'm patient, I can tell this to do a 5-minute exposure, because it looks like this is a 2-minute exposure right now, and it looks like the background isn't getting completely washed out. So there's hope that we can actually finagle this. But since I've been doing 2-minute exposures, I'm going to continue doing 2-minute exposures. In the meantime, I'm going to power up my Sony PlayStation 2 so that I can fly a Starship, because, you know, I mean, might as well do that while I wait for this camera to do what it's supposed to do. Holy space camera, Batman. Alrighty, we're gonna zoom in, zoom out. That looks like a nice bright star. And did we turn off? Whoops, I gotta hit stop. And then we're gonna go here. At some point, I always have to overhaul the laptop in the backyard. It's funny, I had plenty of time to do it. Maybe next time I got a bad week of weather, I'll take the time to do the work on a laptop. I definitely intend on either doing a backup on the laptop or physically removing the SSD and just putting it in a closet, because, like, I feel that if everything works, I don't want to, like, you know, wipe out the software and then have, like, problems getting it back up and running, even though I know how to set it up now. I don't trust Murphy's Law. And so I've come to learn that it never hurts to count upon Murphy's Law. So that's a bummer. I probably didn't even have to shorten the exposure on that. So basically, I'm looking at this star and I want to make sure if this star is in focus. And if there's a brighter star, I'll use it. But that looks like the brightest star up there. So we're going to go up there. And what I'm going to do is put it right here. Then we're going to manually stretch our histogram. Then I'm going to lean real close to the screen so I can really be sure. We're going to basically adjust the motor. Oh shit, my mistake. I was doing this. So I got to get in the habit of, you know, remembering to hit the buttons when I need to hit the buttons. So anyway, I just basically changed the exposure time. We were taking 2-minute exposures. I shortened it. I switched to a red filter because sometimes, even though these filters are supposed to be in focus with one another, the way that light works, the way wavelengths of light behave, you usually have to refocus. So we have a motorized focuser, and if we jump back to the telescope view, we have, you know, it's almost like a rack and pinion. It's actually called a Crayford focuser, but it looks like a rack and pinion focus. And I actually have a motorized box that is way overexposed right now. I don't think we're going to be able to see it that well. Yeah, I thought maybe aiming the camera away would make it darker, but I still have to set this camera up with my CCTV software so that I can... Oh, there we go. It got darker. Not that it reveals a whole lot. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, the little box there. Oh, it's behind me. I'm gonna have to hide. I'm gonna have to hide myself. I'm going into hiding. Hey, what up, Archers? And April's Alien April Ape Adventure, aka the Super Mario channel, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's a lot of games, not just Super Mario, but this man is a big Mario fan. And anybody who's in the chat, if Stephen Ransom is still watching, I humbly recommend that you tune in, you subscribe to that channel if you like vintage gaming and, you know, some good gaming. So yeah, we got Space the Final Frontier in action right here. I was just talking about the motorized focuser, which is right here. Where's my mouse pointer? My mouse pointer ain't showing right now. Oh well. So basically on the back of the telescope is a rectangular box that my mouse pointer isn't pointing at. Why isn't it pointing at it? Oh, there we go. This thingamajig here. So yeah, that's a motorized unit that adjusts the focuser. Basically the camera is this cylindrical bit in the back. The filter wheel is in front of it, and this moves the image sensor away, because whereas on a normal lens, the lenses move, on this telescope, the camera basically has to move back and forth. There we go. Oh yeah, that makes sense. That the phone, if you have a phone showing the stream, you'll always see your status. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I before I have it up on top. You know, it was they changed something in OBS or YouTube recently, and it's like when you hit start streaming, you still gotta click go. You still gotta click go live, and I could almost swear I didn't always have to do that, but now I do. And so this time I clicked go live on the OBS side, but if you look at my OBS window, it doesn't say, the button is not lit up over here. So I'm thinking, well, it's streaming, but I didn't click go live here. So I'm like, you know, is it running? And I think it is, but I know it's running because it's on my other screen. So anyway, getting back to this. What was I braining? My brain. What was my brain braining just now? My brain was braining, and real quick, I want to make a quick fix to that camera view. Whoops, wrong view. Oh shoot, did I delete that? Oh, thank God. I was actually going for that one, and I'm looking for something. Something is missing here. Oh well, doesn't really matter as long as we have what we're looking for here right now. And we also have a friend of the channel called Action Man Gaming, and that guy cracks me up, let me tell you. Okay, so focus, literally, not even figuratively, I have to focus. So to focus, what I like to do is rack out the focuser, because there's a little bit of backlash. So when you rack it out, it'll actually move sideways. So I go back 300 steps, then I go in 200 steps. And then it straightens back out, it picks up the slack, and now all I gotta do is get it to be focused. A sharper point of light. So I'm going in 15 steps at a time, but we're doing half-second exposures here, I believe, right now. So I gotta be real careful not to overshoot my mark. And at this point, I think we're already good. So you can see the stars dancing around a little bit. It's not dancing around enormously, but it is dancing around enough to be a pain in my butt. And if you lose focus a little bit, that sometimes makes it dance around more. But, you know, I guess there's a point where you can tolerate some of that. You know, you got to be able to tolerate it just a bit. So we could do like maybe like a test exposure at like 8 seconds, which takes about 16 seconds to get the first shot, and then I'm going to crank it up a lot and get my PlayStation 2 running. So we'll give that about 7 seconds. Okay, so there's actually a little bar at the bottom of my screen that's counting that we can't see right now. Bottom right corner of that progress bar. And so when it gets to the end, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, okay, that was fast counting. Now we can pick the histogram up and see, we get a preview. So we know we're aiming at the target. We see M106. We see a hint of that other galaxy. We see a hint, barely a hint of that other galaxy. So we know if we crank it up, we're going to get a picture. And since the other pictures were done at 120, we're gonna have to do at 120, and that's all great and dandy, but what sucks about that is it takes 4 minutes for the first picture to come up on screen. But hey, you know, we get the ball rolling on that, and in the meantime I can turn on my PlayStation or explore another target. And I do want to do both. I want to see, if I can queue up a target. Most likely I'll stay on this target, but my intent is when I go to bed is to either have, maybe the hydrogen filter on target, because that filter will filter out a lot of the hazy sky glow. And you can see right now my remote access to my other computer is creating a lot of, caca, right? A lot of this blur. And it goes away almost right away. Like once I zoom in, it goes away. So it's like I'm able to live with it for now. But I do have another remote access program that would probably do a better job in this regard. And, I'm all about redundancy in software. Having a backup that, can do the job if the primary fails. Oh my god, that's cool. So I really probably should be doing that galaxy right there. It's a little bit higher up in the sky. The caveat being it does have a more northerly declination. But that's a bright galaxy. That's a 7.8. And it's somewhat larger. It's still kind of small, but that's a spiral, right? I mean, we see little spiral arms on that. Might have to give this one a chance. I might forego the hydrogen filter and go straight to this, because this is also a 7 on the magnitude. It's a brighter object. And yeah, this is galaxy season, so all we really have are galaxies. Pinwheel galaxy, same concept, but pretty small. This would look, I've seen this one of my old planetary telescope, and it looked, hard to capture, but still really cool, because you see a spiral next to like a neighboring galaxy. Sunflower galaxy, this one looked good on a high mag system if you had the aperture and the light. And remember, I filtered out pretty much everything that is below a certain magnitude, because I decided that I didn't want to bust my butt keeping the camera cranked up, because that would just result in getting a lot of light pollution. See, this would be kind of cool. These are 9 point something on the magnitude, so these would require pretty long exposures. In fact, this neighboring galaxy next to the whale galaxy isn't even being listed right now, because it's being filtered out due to its, being below my cutoff. That was a Polarisma cluster. Well, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to be pointing at that part of the sky anyway. It's way too low. We're pointing at Bayonne, New Jersey if we do that, and it's going to be way too bright. And so now you can see this grouping of stars. What are these? Well, objects, I should say. Well, that's the inside of the Milky Way. We're in the Milky Way, and we're looking at the rest of the Milky Way from inside. And as the Earth rotates through the night, that part of the Milky Way galaxy is going to basically rise. And most of it's actually visible in the southern hemisphere. Now, unfortunately, the sun starts to rise too. So that kind of puts a damper on any efforts to, get a picture of that. If I'm in a mood, I could do solar imaging tomorrow, but solar imaging does require a bit of effort. I have to do a different load out to image the sun. And so what I typically do is I use the little scope, because that little scope on the top, it's pretty easy. You put the solar filter on it, you slide it up the rail, you maybe add like a battery, actually hang a battery on the bottom of the big scope on the front, and that basically compensates for the weight difference. Yeah, so I think the reason is, that's an interesting thought. I think the reason, Stephen, is called the whale galaxy. I'm going to take a guess here. Well, not really a guess. I'm going to take a look at it, and he's like, actually, I have an opinion of that, and I'm curious now if it does do any of the spouting out of gases. Now, depending on when it got the name, if the name came out early enough, I'd say that would be a no. But if it came out recent enough, I'd say it's conceivable because, you know, there was a time where it would be hard to image. Actually, you know, you're onto something here because, I mean, I see a whale shape, almost like a sperm whale or, you know, a big blue whale or whatever. You know, especially if I, like, look at it from further away, it's got, like, a thicker part, it's got that pointy nose thing. But, interestingly, yeah, there's something there. Now, I don't know if there's emissions or if that's just a coincidental, like, dwarf galaxy or a gas cloud nebula, perhaps. But it definitely has that quality to it, like a whale. It's got the whale shape and something that resembles a blowhole doing its, you know, spouting of gases. So I'd say it could go both ways. But me personally, I just see a general shape of a whale. I don't know if I was the guy. If I was the guy naming the galaxy, I don't know if I would have seen the whale. But now that someone calls it the whale galaxy, I see a whale. And back in the day when people were using whale oil for lighting, although I don't know, I don't even know when they started seeing galaxies. I think galaxies were like, I think it was like 1900s or something like that. Like that's when people really started seeing galaxies. Or knowing what they were looking at. Sometimes I like to look at stars that are named after sci-fi franchises. So like, you know, Altair or Zetar. And I thought Altair, I was mixing up Altair with another star from Star Trek, but Altair is the name. Oh shit. Oh, thank God. I hit the button just now, and I'm so sorry. I did it again. I gotta get in a habit. I didn't switch to the screen. So let me repeat that. I apologize, Steven, because I was just describing something and I was not showing it on screen. So as I was saying, let's get back to that whale galaxy one more time because I made a mistake. I was describing it, I was looking at it, I was pointing at it, and I was not actually, you know, showing it on screen. So anyway, yeah, whale galaxy. I see the shape of a whale here. I'm going to move it away from the crosshair a little bit. And I mean, from afar especially, I see a whale. Just in general, like I said, sperm whale, blue whale, I definitely see that shape. But additionally, we do have that little nebulosity there, that cloud detail, and it looks like we're getting some atmospheric caca right now, because this thing started blinking red. That usually means that it's having a hard time seeing the object of, you know, the guide star. So we're going to crank up the brightness a little bit, or the gain. And the reason I just used profanity was because if you have an object selected with your mouse and you press Control 1 on the keyboard, it usually means the mount is going to automatically aim at that target. And that's not something you want. You don't want the telescope aiming at a new target while you're in the middle of imaging an existing target. So as it stands right now, we're getting a few shots in the red filter, but I'm not expecting much here. You know, I mean, it's very washed out. 2-minute exposures. Now, some people, they'll take a shorter exposure in order to, you know, reduce the amount of light pollution and sky glow. And that's not a bad idea. But my concern with taking that option is that I wouldn't be able to get any of this spiral action detail. So I crank it up a bit, hoping it's not a problem. Now, also, the way my image sensor is, the way my imaging train is, for some reason I have this like dark area. Now there's ways to deal with that. You take, believe it or not, you cover the camera up, you take pictures of all black, and then use those black pictures to subtract any noise. So if you have a pixel that is constantly, you know, brighter than the rest of the pixels, taking a black exposure will basically allow you to compensate, to subtract, to take out the difference and get a cleaner image. Venkman's here? I see you saying Venkman's name in here. Oh, I get it. Ghostbusters note. Venkman. That would be bad. Safe tip noted. I should know my Ghostbusters references. For a second there, I thought the Peter Venkman fan site was up in here. But in any case, I always welcome a Ghostbusters reference. Do not cross streams, as they say. Yeah, so you know, it's kind of so-so. And so the ideal scenario is you would take an application like Deep Sky Stacker, and you take a series of images that you know are good. Let's just say these 5 here. And then you would add dark frames to this, which we don't have right now, so we're not going to do darks. And we tell the program, register the pictures. Basically, it's going to do some processing, pre-processing on them. And it should be noted that when you take a dark exposure, a black exposure, in order to, you know, do that black frame subtraction, you have to take note of the temperature. You have to have the right temperature, because if you're not using any cooling on the camera whatsoever, it's going to be more noise prone. When you get graininess on a long exposure, that's because of the heat. The camera's image sensor is turning heat into electrons. So whereas it's supposed to turn photons into electrons, it's turning heat into electrons. And so we actually cool the image sensor down to prevent that. And I'm so glad, I'm delighted to see Action Man Gaming in the chat right now, because Action Man Gaming is indeed a man of action. And a week ago, I was telling Action Man how I planned on like pumping iron that afternoon. I was like, I'm gonna lift some weights today, I said to the man. And hours later, it was late, and he messages me during a stream, and he goes, hey man, did you lift your weights? And I go, nah man, got sidetracked. And then immediately, due to sheer will and inspiration, I picked up a 30-pound weight, and I just started pounding that shit out. And then I went back to my stream. But yeah, let's put in a link to that, because I highly recommend his content. I especially would direct your attention to his video. Was it a video or a live stream? His video or live stream? Let me see here. I believe it was a video. Yep. I would direct your attention to his video from a month ago. Action Man Plays God of War. That is a great video. That is a hilarious video. I was highly amused by his God of War video. So of course that would be under the videos tab, and you basically just scroll down to the bottom of the page. Now as for the game you played Among Us. I tried playing Among Us, and I gave up because like there was no single player mode. You know, it's like I want to play the game alone. I don't want to be stuck in a game with multiple people, because then if I want to go and have a snack, I can't, because I don't want to leave people hanging. But yeah, true, you gotta pump steak. You gotta eat steaks. Wait, did I just say you gotta pump steak? You gotta pump iron, eat steaks, love women, or be loved by women with your action muscles. And it's true, it's good to have natural testosterone in abundance. And I suspect that a young man like Action Man, because I think he's a slightly younger lad. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing he's slightly younger than us. Not terribly young, just a little younger. Has, you know, that testosterone comes easier for you. Don't take it for granted. Not that it goes away. It doesn't go away, thank God. At least it shouldn't, if you're a man of action. But, man, when you're young, to be young again, But then also things are more brutal when you're young at times, right? Like, you know, it's like, you got a house. Not that I have my own house, but if you have your own house, if you ever get your own house, you got to keep women away with a stick. Literally, you got to keep them away with a stick. You got to get that stick out, like, da, ja, ja, you know. At least I've been told that in certain... Anyway, sidetracking on sociological stuff here. But, you know, you got to weed out the good ones and the chameleoid ones. And the fun ones, of course, there's the fun ones. I appreciate a girl who could be honest about having fun. They don't have to be committed to me. They just got to be honest about not being committed to me, you know? Although I'm not into that, you know, I would not, that means I'm also not obligated to be committed to someone either. I love when people say they're in an open relationship, but it really just means that their girlfriend is in the open relationship and they're really in an open... I'm sorry, they say they're polyamorous. That's what they say. The guy would be like, yeah, man, we're polyamorous. But they're really in an open relationship, because polyamorous would be if they were like both doing it, you know, getting side action. But of course, if only the woman's getting side action, then it's an open relationship. It's not polyamorous. And then What was the other interesting one I stumbled into that amused the crap out of me? 1969. God bless you, Steven. I gotta say, Steven had me fooled. No offense, but you had me fooled, man. You had this picture on your profile where you looked younger, and then you updated your imagery or whatever. But there was a picture where you had like dark hair. I'm pretty sure, unless it was like the picture was just cropped a certain way. But you had a picture that made you look deceptively younger. And I mean, you don't look like an old man or anything like that. I mean, like, you know, you're not like a boomer. You're the generation after them, I believe, or maybe even you might be Generation X. I think you're Generation X, right? Are you Generation X, Steven? Ah, man, Generation X was alright. I gotta say, I didn't mind Generation X. They were cool. I had teachers from Generation X, you know, like when you're like in the 3rd, 4th grade, you have a teacher who's 23 years old, and they're cool. You know, they were alright. So, you know, that's Generation X. So anyway, okay, we got 6 exposures in here. And how did our stacking go? Did I get sidetracked? Oh, wow, that's awful. Okay, let's see if we can fix that right now. So we're going to do log, apply. There we go, and you can see it processes it in tiles because, that's what it's got to do. And then we could take this guy here, this little line down here. Actually, I got to do this one here. And then what we do is you drag it to the right or the left. Okay, that's clearing up. See, we can see the galaxy. And you see the image looks considerably smoother than it did before. So this is sort of like what we're going for here. So we're going to do this a little more. We're going to get a little greedy now. As you can see, things get a little more challenging as you do that. Because now, you know, we're getting that darker background. And, you know, you don't need a dark background. When you first take the picture, a dark background is not required. The dark background becomes... Oh, I hate when that happens. I don't know how to get rid of that. So anyway, we have an object here. See, I don't even know how to... Oh, there we go. See, that's like what we were looking at earlier. And it's not much, but it's something. And we can try, you know, maybe like playing with the histogram a little bit. We could try different tricks. We could do that. You know who looks like a tough guy? Fat Steven. I love his artwork. I love how it's like, he's got this artwork where he's got this like dead serious scowl on his face. And it just says Fat Steven. It's like so antithetical. It's like cool, tough guy, but self-deprecating title at the same time, you know? But he's not really making fun of himself. He's making fun of Fat Steven Seagal, real Steven Seagal, who is fat. But yet, he's also kind of like, you know, that's his name. That's now his handle, right? You know? And I noticed he doesn't call himself Fat Steven Seagal anymore. I don't know if he got, like, a copyright claim where someone came after him and, like, Steven Seagal's lawyers were like, you cannot call yourself Fat Steven Seagal. And then he had to name himself Fat Steven instead. But good times. Good name. Good name. A while back, we were having an anime stream on Pacific 414's channel. You know, it was a discussion. And someone brings up the time that Saban released a trailer or a preview of their own Sailor Moon series. It was called, Sailor Moon, but it was a live-action series by Saban. You know, the guys who do, I think, VR Troopers and possibly Superhuman Samurai. Or I could be mixing up shows, but you get the idea. And so they take, like... what do you call it? A fucking, they make this preview. They play it at some anime expo. It was awful. It was like the worst song ever. It was like literally live action girls, and then they would mix it with a cartoon. So almost like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. And it had this awful song. Like, I shouldn't really even sing it because I might get, turned into a soundbite. I mean, you can look it up. I could even post a link if you want to be subjected to that. But I played this video on Pacific Channel because I figured everyone wanted to see this because they did. But then the way the girls are, they're doing this doopy dance. They're like, in fact, they're not just dancing like that. They're doing their hands up like this. They're like, and I'm just imitating that shit. And of course, I got ragged on hard. And now every time I appear on a stream and this gets brought up and Cash Money's on that stream, like, oh, Ron, don't put on that Sailor Moon stuff, man. You know, you gotta stay away from that Sailor Moon. And they're not talking about regular Sailor Moon. They're talking about Saban Sailor Moon. It's like, I mean, you can only watch a 1-minute trailer so many times. And once again, the only reason they were holding against me is because I was imitating the dance, and it was over the top. Because they had like a girl in a wheelchair, so they had like late 1990s inclusion. You know, you had like, you know, multiple girls in high school, you know, doing the whole Sailor Moon thing in live action, and then you had like one girl in a wheelchair because, you know, you need to have that inclusion, and it was great because like even the girl in the wheelchair is like doing wheelies in her wheelchair, dude. Like she's all like, you know, like, and like, I don't know. I think maybe someone was rolling her wheelchair around and throwing it around. But I distinctly remember something along the lines of her like doing spins in this wheelchair. Which if you had like a real condition, I don't think you'd go that wild in your wheelchair. But maybe I'm wrong, you know. So yeah, you know. Yeah, they sure do. Wow, an iPhone. I remember my first iPhone and my last iPhone. Actually, it wasn't my last iPhone. My last iPhone was an iPhone 4. I was between work and I had a spare iPhone 4. I forgot how I got it, but I had one, and that was actually a nice phone. Like, it had like this nice stainless steel frame. It was a beautiful design for like an itty bitty screen. And I used to use the bike ride app on it, you know, when I was doing a lot of mileage when I was between work. But it was highly limiting. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was able... Did I jailbreak that phone? I don't remember if I broke my iPhone 4. I think I decided not to because I didn't want to be frustrated by bullshit. Because when you jailbreak an iPhone, you just need a bad update. You just need to gobble up a bad update to make your life miserable, you know? So I wasn't about having any of that shit. But, that phone was still a pretty good design. I'm just taking a guess here. Whew! That doesn't help at all. But yeah, oh, that's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know if that's actually really cool, but it certainly looks different. So you get the idea. That's like a microcosm of what you do in image processing. And then you repeat that for all three. So that's like I believe the blue, that's luminance. So you do that with the blue, green, and red filters separately, and you integrate them. So there's usually better software that I use for that, more advanced software, but you use that program, the one I just used. At least I use this program, Deep Sky Stacker, to get like a simplified preview. My geek talk is killing you, huh? Your geek talk is killing me, engineers. I'm not even an engineer. I mean, I'm sure if I, you know, in a Walking Dead scenario, I can certainly, you know, substitute for an engineer, a real engineer, a qualified one. You know, you get someone who does better math. I'm sure that would help me out a little bit, but you know, could be done. I wouldn't necessarily put me in charge of building a bridge, a big bridge, but you know, you got it right. Real engineers got to do real mathematics, you know. Now, electrical engineers, don't even get me started. That is a discipline of its own. I think I got Fat Stevens to go. Oh, yeah, my phone like was playing the other guy who tuned in before, the Nintendo guy, right? And it went from playing his live stream, which ended, to playing Fat Steven. So now, let's see what we can do here. Okay, so getting it to be a little hazier outside. In fact, I'm going to check the Aviation Weather Center. Let's see what these guys are up to here. So we're going to do AWC. I didn't even know who Paul Shadow was. I've seen him too. But what happened was I was looking for videos that were shitting on Star Trek Picard. I was looking for a video to jive with my confirmation bias. So just to jive with my overall bias. And I find this Paul Shadow guy. I was like, all right, he's reasonable. He's not necessarily shitting on it like crazy. But, you know, I'm kind of agreeing with this guy. And then, yeah, this map is a little screwed. It looks like the satellite kind of like went into a bad spot or something, because normally the satellite that gives this imagery is pretty consistent about giving good imagery. But bottom line is we're not seeing a glut of cloud cover. If anything, I think this isn't cloud cover. This is obviously, cloud cover that's moving around. I'm like down here between Long Island and New Jersey, so, Yeah. Now, I just got one of them playing a channel, but it's funny. I had to check because this phone could have just as well been playing another channel. But this is my Galaxy Note 8. It's a fine phone, let me tell you. Like, the Galaxy Note 8, this is my shower phone. Because this is what you use when when you take a shower. Now, right now, I'm using it because it was a reliable way to remotely access my telescope. When I went outside to, make adjustments, I would use this to, basically just get, the convenient control. Because even though my other phone has a folding screen, it's kind of, in not the best condition because it's not the most durable phone. And I find that, sometimes you use that phone and things jump across the screen. I mean, look, there's a green line in the screen. There's a white line here because one time I was taking a dump and I went to press down on the bump in the screen here because there's a bump, and instead I ended up making a dead area in the display panel, the OLED display. So now you have a black spot and a white line going across it. And what I did was I painted acrylic black paint, or maybe was it enamel. I put black paint over the white line because when you're in bed, this thing is literally bright white light coming in a straight line. So now we got the black paint blocking it. When the first time it happened, there was a bright green vertical line going up the center of the screen. Now there's a line there, but it's not as bad. It's a faint green line. And then lately, this is unrelated damage. There's a green line now that's consistently here. There's always been a vertical line on the left edge, but this happened because there's a magnet here to sort of magnetically clasp it shut, like a lot of laptops have a magnet. And so what happened was a piece of metallic grit got stuck here, and then when I put it in my pocket, the rest is history. And that happened on 2 of these. I got a buy one get one free deal. Now luckily the outer screen's good, and so it's not terrible. It's nice having access to a bigger screen for certain things, and it's fine having this. I don't really need this big case, but it certainly protects it, and for how delicate the phone is, it works. Now, this is the Note 8, and it's a beautiful phone on its own, but I do use the OtterBox commuter. I don't use the OtterBox Defender. The OtterBox Defender is a fine case. In fact, I don't even know if they make a Defender for this phone, because the Defender is the water. In fact, yeah, they do. I have it, and it's bulkier, but realistically, the OtterBox Defender no longer provides waterproofing for this phone because this phone is waterproof. What the OtterBox Defender does is it makes it a little bit tougher. It basically covers up the entire side of the curved screen, so it creates a bezel. But I found that as long as you have a good tempered glass screen protector on at all times, and as long as you're willing to replace your tempered glass screen protector every time it takes damage, it'll always protect the phone. Think about it like a tempered glass is like ablative armor on a starship. It absorbs, something hits it, the sheet of glass that's tacked on the front cracks. You peel it off, you put a new sheet of glass on. The idea is that if this thing wasn't on, the energy that went into cracking the screen protector would have gone into cracking the actual screen. And so, yeah, people don't like tempered glass screen protectors because they break easily. But what they're not understanding is that, yeah, they might break easily at times, but you'd rather have the tempered glass break, almost like a sacrificial layer, than to have the actual screen break. And I think my brother, one year, I go, yo, you want anything for your phone for Christmas? Like a screen protector? He goes, oh, yeah, but can you get me one of those regular rubbery screen protectors? And I think what was happening was his wife gets mad when he, if he drops his phone or breaks the screen, she gets, really, annoyed. Or gives him a hard time. Oh, look, something flew in front. See that line there? That means something flew in front. It could be an airplane. It could be a satellite. Let's see if it's a satellite. So how do we identify a satellite? Well, that might be tricky now because that thing probably came and went. And I'd have to be zoomed in darned close. And I don't think searching the word Starlink is going to narrow it down because, you know, even if it is a Starlink satellite, good luck narrowing it down. But we could try. Yeah, it doesn't even come up. Like, what's funny is, like, when the satellites are flying over, you'll see them. Like, it'll literally, like, show a dot. It'll say Starlink number 552, and then it'll be moving quicker than everything else because, of course, you know, satellites are moving. So, yeah, as you were saying, so see multiple tablets in next gen does make sense. That's took like a minute to process when I first saw it, but that's funny, man. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of like, I'm the first person to say that's ridiculous, but then I'm sitting here like, you know, it's like I'm studying for the finals. Like, I got my Edgar Allan Poe book right over here. I got my fucking math book over here, all right? Yeah, I'm an engineer, so I'm gonna have my engineering tablet. Remember Jordy had a red tablet? All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have many of the devices in front of me right now. And ironically, I mean, we do have our gaming portable, right? I mean, it is ridiculous on Star Trek when they have, like, you know, multiple tablets representing different literature. There was an episode of DS9 where friggin' O'Brien's on vacation and he brings, like, multiple, like, engineering manuals. And he's sitting there in the frickin' runabout with Keiko with, like, pad. And it's like, this is not necessary. You just need one big screen pad and maybe one little screen tab. And you can switch between them. But, you know, whatever. Now, on the other hand, I gotta hand it to the episode Paradise Lost when Cisco goes to Starfleet headquarters and he puts a pad on a control panel and downloads, you know, some book or something from that pad. Oh, and there was that line. It stopped in the middle, and then when it took a new picture, apparently there was another line that continued up here. So, you know, it was like end of the exposure, the line ends here, and a new picture, the line continues here. But yeah, you know, so they had like something similar to near field communication basically on DS9. Okay, good. So we got 15 exposures, possibly of mediocre quality. Now we can get adventurous. We can switch to hydrogen alpha, which I believe is a subset of red, which means I probably don't have to refocus for that one. Also, it should be noted that I could probably set my image sensor to negative 15 degrees. It was warm out before, and it wouldn't let me get lower than negative 14, so I set it to negative 10 because I figured that would be easier. So now we could either do a 2-minute exposure in hydrogen alpha to prove the power of hydrogen, and that's going to be 3 minutes out. So in the meantime, I'm going to grab that Star Trek game, and what we can do is, where's my main screen? I'm going to grab the remote access utility and paste it onto my HDMI input. That's a good point. You know, especially a red tablet. You know, I always wanted to paint electronics red. I did it once. I painted a camera red, and I'd paint more electronics red if I, you know, had more reasons to paint them red. Especially if they had special purposes. In fact, my last iPhone, the iPhone 4, which was like many years ago, like 2013-ish, 2014, 2013, around then, my iPhone 4. I bought a beautiful red glass for it. The back of it was music, but I think I cracked the glass on the back of it at one point, so I replaced the glass on the back of it with this red tinted glass, and I think I even managed to replace the glass on the front of it. I think by then they made it easier to swap out the screen, and it was easy to buy a screen for it, if I remember correctly. And yeah, it had like this red mirror finish to it. It looked beautiful until it got obsolete and I replaced it with something superior. But yeah, that was a cool, beautiful setup for, you know, a while. Okay, so you can see already the picture looks very dark because it spent half the time taking pictures in the red filter. Hey, where's my mouse pointer? it spent half the time in broadband red, and then now it spent half the time in narrowband hydrogen. So when we get the next picture, I'm hoping that we're gonna get crisp detail compared to what we had before, because you can see down here a hint of that detail. Barely. Is that another satellite or something? Now also, when people bitched and moaned about Starlink satellites, yeah, I can see it being an issue, but like, I think measures are being taken to, you know, mitigate that. The reason that the Starlink thing doesn't really bother me is because serious astrophotographers, semi-serious people can, you know, do things in their post-processing to get rid of the lines. They call it sigma clipping. Basically, it identifies anomalous objects like straight lines. The other people bitching were these observatories in the middle of bumblefuck, like in Chile. And yeah, I can empathize with them a little better. But it should be noted that Starlink satellites do not give their worst light pollution once they're up. They only get, I mean, let me phrase it. Starlink satellites provide their worst light pollution after launch. Because after launch, you're going to have like 10 satellites or whatever in a train, a satellite train, flying close to each other. So they're very distinct, they're brightly lit. But over the course of about 3 weeks or so, using ion engines, they boost up to a higher orbit. So it basically is a way of, instead of having like to launch a large payload to, you know, boost it to a high orbit, they launch multiple satellites to a low orbit. All of the Starlink satellites are equipped with ion thrusters, which are basically, you know, electrically powered. They don't necessarily have to carry, you know, reaction mass or fuel, at least not in the same form. And they can run for weeks on end. That's the beauty of ion engines, is that they can run for extended periods of time, whereas a normal rocket engine runs for like a few minutes tops. An ion engine can literally run continuously. And for deep space missions, sometimes that's fine, because like it's the weight, or like maybe it's a little more than the equivalent of the weight of this box, or the weight of a sheet of paper. But the way thrust works in space, you know, for every second you have that pressure, it adds up, and basically you continually accelerate the longer you have that itty bitty amount of force being, you know, done. If you have a large amount of force, like on a big rocket, yeah, sure, then every second that you keep that running, you're gonna get faster and faster. But the rule applies even with weaker forces. And yeah, so over the course of weeks, a Starlink satellite will, you know, basically have, like, let's say 2 of them next to each other. As they go to a higher orbit, they're gonna spread out. And so that satellite train with 10 satellites next to each other is now going to be like 1, 1, 1. And the time that they tend to reflect the most light is when they're like off the horizon, when the sun is getting them at an angle, basically. That is when you're going to have that problem, you know. If they're directly overhead, a Starlink satellite will not, you know, create that bright signature. Now, of course, Elon claimed that he's going to paint the satellites, or they're going to start painting them with a darker paint. And that helps. But the issue was the solar panel on them. So a Starlink satellite was like, you'd have like a little box, smaller than this box. So let's just say size of this cross section here. And you'd have the solar panel on it like this. And so something the size of the side of this box isn't too big. Especially if you look at it from the bottom, this isn't that bad. And if you have something sticking up straight, you know, if you're looking at it from, you know, the ground, and there's like nothing, like a little box on the bottom of this, but the solar panel part is facing you, then yeah, it's going to reflect light like a mirror. But if it's, the ground is underneath it, and the solar panel is pointing up like a shark fin, then actually the bottom of the satellite, the boxy bit, is blocking the reflective bit. And so it's all good and dandy when it's overhead. See, like, that's the bottom of the satellite. The solar panel has a very low profile, even if you could see it. But as you're orbiting the Earth and the angle changes, then yeah, as it's below the horizon, you're going to see, instead of this, you're going to see that. So there is a short period of time where that's still an issue at the moment. They've been doing different things, trying to like orient the angle of it, so to speak, you know, angling it different ways to try to mitigate that. So I am hopeful. What bothers me is that, yeah, a bunch of other companies are getting on the bandwagon, but like I remember a friend was telling me about it and basically saying, oh yeah, your hobby's going to be ruined. And I'm like, let's just play it by ear here, because I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue, you know? And it's like, if it is, so I add another workflow, another step to my workflow. So yeah, Apple makes a pretty box. I had one of the first color iMacs. Well, I didn't really. I had a one years after they were relevant. My friend's mom worked at a place and they were giving away iMac G3s. So I got my hands on a green iMac, and that was kind of cool. You know, they were kind of cute. You know, as my first personal introduction to the Mac OS. And yeah, that was pretty sweet. Now, what is my video encoder doing? I'm doing a little video encoding because I got a Japanese anime series called Galaxy Express 39, and basically I was taking the Blu-ray rip, the copy I bought on Blu-ray, literally purchased it on Blu-ray and copied it to my computer so that I can put it on my personal media server and have the best quality copy, better than what you could download. Basically, that was my intent, is to have a better copy than what you could bootleg on a download site. And frankly, I do want to support the content creators. I do want to support it by paying for it. But exactly, Steven, you know, software does solve the problem. Now, I do got to admit that, you know, sometimes it could get a little tedious after a while. But, you know, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge. As for the observatories, I'd say, look, work together with the industry or whatever you got to do. But, it's not that big of a deal. So you waste, like, especially a Chilean observatory, you waste a few minutes worth of data. Big whoop, like, you know, they're in Chile. They don't get any rain anyway. Over here in New York, I get rain plenty of the time, right? During the summer, it's going to be humid outside. It's going to be a ton of shit going against me. But a telescope in Chile? Well, they're chilling, so to speak. So, yeah. As it stands now, I'm not going to really play that Star Trek game tonight, because then it's going to get real late. I'm trying to keep an earlier schedule so that I can get up at 10 a.m. to get my hair cut on Friday morning. It's a bummer it's that early in the morning, but I got to get it done. I want to try to get my hair cut before the Mario movie. Hell, I might see the Mario movie tomorrow regardless of getting a haircut. I might just wing it. Like, I look like I got a haircut already. That's because I just took a shower and I put a bunch of shit in my hair. And so what I do is I don't wash the shit out of my hair. I sleep with it. I'll maybe even put more in the morning, and I'll leave it there for a week. And that's what I do when I'm between haircuts, and it kind of works. But yeah, anyway, 39 is a great anime, and it is the first anime that my family ever watched. We used to watch it together. Like, my dad would literally have me and my brother sitting on his lap. And he would read the subtitles to us when I was like 5. My brother might have been 8. Maybe I was 3 years old. I don't even know. And the big issue with this one was, okay, good, the subtitles work. So one of the problems I was having was I was hitting the wrong button and I wasn't getting subtitles. And as it stands now, I'm still not getting subtitles. Wait, what the? It's not good. It's not good. Oh, there we go. Let's see. It should give the word Galaxy Express 39 at the top. Okay, there we go. Good. So that means the subtitles work. So I was having different problems. At one point, my program was automatically giving me subtitles, and then it stopped doing it at that, you know, length. Now, another issue is with this version of the Galaxy Express DOC is it's got very grainy, you know, it's very grainy, and I got to be careful. I think I just skipped to the end of the episode. I got to close my eyes. I don't want to go to the end of the episode. Okay, that was close. Yeah, I gotta be careful. I think this is part 2 of a 2-parter, and I didn't see this part yet. Not entirely. So, only issue was I got a 3 gigabyte file here. That's way too big. I was adjusting. I was using different optimizations, and then I have a 700 megabyte file, which is closer to what I want. And this one's fine. One thing I discovered is animation is harder to compress. It's harder to get a smaller file out of animated content than with live action content. So that's just in case you ever, you know, need to do anything with video compression, or if you're doing something in OBS, like, you know, configuring OBS, it can help a lot to know that. So with that, the other setting I discovered was this optimization setting, which isn't even listed here right now, which is not good. Where did it go? But basically, I found a setting that makes it take longer to do the video encoding, but it does get you a smaller file. So that one is... We'll put that here. I'm just going to really quickly make sure I get this into the queue. Although, I probably shouldn't be running this while I am sleeping, because it'll just make me toasty and sweaty. So I had to remember to hit the plus button to add subtitles, which I think I already did. So hopefully that will work this time. Yep, there we go. Subtitles are listed. Okay, good. So that'll work. I'm using an audio codec called FLAC, which is a lossless audio codec. And you can do all kinds of filtering to take away the grain, the film grain, but it'll also cause issues with making the file ridiculously large. And then there was some oddball setting in here. Good, I turned off that oddball setting. So when I add this to the queue, basically this program will process them in the order that they are listed. And so, yeah, and this one's going to be a 2 gig file. I'm going to pause it and tell it to start the next file. And this one, unfortunately, would take really long, but it's fine. And then this one, whoops. This one I'm going to postpone, because I think I already did this file. It's listed right over here. And 700 megs isn't bad. I'd love to get it down to 500 megabytes for like a half hour. That's a great question. And I do have answers. Well, I don't have answers, but I think I have pretty solid like speculation on that. And number one, let's think about the distances involved. Like, you'll get this from like people in the flat earth community. They'll say, you know, especially when they're really religious, they'll say like that it's ridiculous to think that space is so big and all of this stuff. But it's like, no, there's nothing wrong. Even if, like, you know, I'm not super religious at all, but if I was religious, I would say that space being ginormous is consistent with the existence of a God. I think it's perfectly consistent with that, because, you know, religious people always say that God is everywhere. Well, shit, wouldn't a God who, you know, can be everywhere in a, you know, super enormous universe be quite almighty? I would think so, you know. But that being besides the point, literally, like, let's think about how long it takes light to go any meaningful distance. And I may have to pull up a, like, some kind of star map just to give us the reference. And let's see, I just lowered the temperature of the camera to -15. So I want to tell the computer that the camera is -15 degrees Celsius. So, and I do have opinions about those freaking videos with the UFOs, the UAP bullshit. Okay, because that shit makes me tight. And I mean, like, when that motherfucker with the goatee comes up on, like, the mainstream media, you know, what's his name, Luis Elizondo. When that motherfucker comes up on fucking Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, and he's all like saying he worked for the UFO Pentagon office. He's this guy, literally, he's like this fat guy who wears a suit and he's got like a goatee and a soul patch like me, except that I only wear the soul patch so that I don't get rough skin over here. It has nothing to do with me wanting to look like a douche, but this guy named Elizondo comes up on the news. They show him the UFO footage. He goes, yes, I worked for the Pentagon's UFO research office. And he says that this video of this object making these maneuvers is evidence of extraterrestrial life. And he says that is because these vehicles are definitely not of earthly origin. And if anything, the problem is that a guy who claims to be a Pentagon whistleblower, right off the bat, that's a red flag. If he was a Pentagon whistleblower, he wouldn't be on the fucking mainstream media. And so I'm guessing that his role is to, you know, potentially distract us, to sidetrack us, to confuse us, to, you know, misdirect our attention away from black budget aircraft, because it is conceivable that you would get a highly maneuverable craft. Beyond that, in some of the UAP footage that we see from those aircraft carriers, those Navy aviators, those, you know, airplane infrared cameras from the fighter jets. Some of that could be explained as like something like a balloon or as a jet passenger airliner over the horizon, something that, you know, would create an infrared signature, because of course the job of a camera isn't necessarily to know what it's looking at. I mean, hell, I think the shit we're seeing here, like, I mean, I got like this bright starburst pattern on the side of my camera over here. Does that mean that, you know, we found a super bright star? Nah, that's just the amplifier in the camera creating glow. These white speckles, that's the camera converting heat into electrons, and those are not extra stars. But getting back on topic here, to answer the question, because I did get a little sidetracked here ranting about the Elizondo guy, and I'm just going to put the chat here so I can read it without looking at my secondary screen. Allow me to just resize that. So, you know, number one, how come there's been no evidence of aliens yet? Well, basically, I'd say, unless there's alien life in our own star system, the challenge with that is the distances we're dealing with. So let's take Andromeda, our nearest galaxy. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to open up the star map on my main computer so that I can really have my way with it, because of course this computer here, the remote computer, is going to get a little overtaxed. But bottom line is that we're talking about light years at a time. So in order for extraterrestrial life to meet us, if they come from a different star system, they'd have to be able to make the journey. If there's not more than one alien species in our own galaxy, then now we're talking about extremely daunting time scales for the travel time. And so that's why when that Elizondo guy came on to the mainstream media to, you know, claim he was a Pentagon, you know, UFO, you know, whistleblower, he was able to, you know, get away with making this assertion that these craft must be from a different star system. And, you know, let me phrase it, because like the idea was that if something is highly maneuverable like this, and it's not our technology, it must be from aliens. And if it's from aliens and they're that advanced, then sure, why can't they come from really far away? But I think, you know, it's unfair to rule out, you know, of the factors, to go straight to the punch, especially when it's highly suspicious for somebody to claim to be from, you know, a whistleblower office. But number two, moving on, we were originally talking about distances. So, in fact, Andromeda was already listed here. Perfect. So we're going to fast forward the night a little bit. And we're going to just turn off the sky, because we don't really need the sky for this. And I believe this should tell me the distance here somewhere, like how far away it is. If it doesn't, I'll just type it into a search engine. But I can give you an even better example, because this is actually really cool. How big is the Oort cloud, for example? Like, you know, like or full, you know, full scale solar system. So even our own solar system is like obscenely big. So, you know, you get out to Pluto, that's like, you know, a certain amount of astronomical units away. You go out further, we're talking even more. Okay, I don't want to see this cartoon thing. I want to see something more useful here. So, what is one astronomical unit? One astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. How many AU away is Pluto? 39 AU. So basically 39 times the distance between us and the Sun is Pluto. Our fastest spacecraft took 10 years to get there. Now, how big is the Oort cloud? Now, this is where it gets cool. The Kuiper belt, which is like basically almost an extension of where Pluto is, that Kuiper belt is between 30 and 55 AU. So yeah, Pluto is sort of like in the inner part of the Kuiper belt, and it goes out to 55 AU. How big is the Oort cloud? Now is where it gets fun. Now we're talking light years. We're talking 2,000 to 100,000 astronomical units. So we went from the Kuiper belt being in the magnitude of like, let's get a big picture if we can. We talked about the Oort cloud being like in the neighborhood of Pluto, which is like not even exactly listed here, but it's somewhere before the termination shock. It's, after Neptune, it's basically in this area here-ish. This is our Oort cloud. Now, the only thing that blows my mind about the Oort cloud is, at some point, I don't even know if it counts as part of the solar system, because it's almost just a spherical clumping of rocks between 1,000 and 100,000 AU. But just talking about this area here, Pluto is only, 30-something AU out. The Kuiper Belt goes out to 55 AU. Our Voyager probe got roughly past this area here. It's going to have a long way to go there. But bottom line is, I just think the distances are too vast. And so our best bet is if there was like parallel evolution life forms here, maybe we'd see them. But I just think that, like, unfortunately, something that was disheartening to me was when somebody, said the question of whether alien life exists was pointless to them. And I think that was a stupid take, but I understood where they were coming from, because their argument was, why would it, how it wouldn't even matter if, for example, alien life exists. Because look, alien life has to exist. It's like, it seems like a statistical necessity for alien life of some kind to exist. Like, if we could evolve even with a little helping from some, creator, it's not unreasonable for that to happen elsewhere. The universe is too damn big for that not to happen, But what was I going to say? I got a little mentally sidetracked here. And let's read some of the chats while I do that. So, good questions here, Archer. Let's move on to your second question. How come mankind can't colonize other planets? I think we can. I do see the challenges, right? And I think, like, for example, some people argue we should do it on the moon first, just to iron out the kinks. Because even though the moon isn't necessarily a good or necessary stopping point for going to Mars, you don't need the moon to jump or springboard to Mars. It's a good idea just to practice, like, to make sure that you can survive, like, safely, make sure that your equipment works, because, like, a dry rehearsal, now, you go to Mars, shit goes wrong. Instead of being like 3 to 5 to 6 days away from help, you're like at least 6 months away from help, unless you got that nuclear rocket. If you got a nuclear rocket, that might make it feasible. And you know what? I could appreciate Elon pushing forward, because maybe that will motivate those involved to get a good working nuclear rocket. Because you get a nuclear rocket, you get that trip down to 2 months, maybe even 6 weeks. You cut down the radiation exposure, you cut down a lot of other factors, danger factors. Maybe even get like a what we call a conveyor belt going. But it definitely is expensive and daunting to do Mars, much less other planets. Now, why don't we colonize other star systems? Why don't we go to our nearest one, like Alpha Centauri? Well, one, we want to know, is there habitable space over there? Is there a habitable planet? We don't want to, like, set up shop. We don't want to send a generational ship there, a ship that can do, a 200-year journey with multiple generations of families on it, maybe a 100-year journey, only to find out we get there and there's nowhere to settle down, So we're going to need to do some recon. And so there's a project called Breakthrough Starshot, and the objective is to send really tiny probes. I'm talking like probes almost like not much bigger than a wristwatch, like a little circuit board with like a chip on it, like a camera chip, and different sensors, and a solar sail. And the idea is to use lasers instead of the sun to push these solar sails so that these little itty-bitty probes, groups of them, can get to Alpha Centauri in 20 years. Basically, if you have a light enough weight for your probe, and you could use the laser on a solar sail, you can get it to like a good fraction of the speed of light. I'm talking 10% the speed of light, which might not seem like a lot, but that's very significant. And 20 years to Alpha Centauri, a target that is like, I think, what was it, 50 light years or 10 light years? Either way, it's like in a reasonable, it might be 20 light years, and it's not unreasonable. Alpha Centauri, 20 light years ain't bad. You're still talking about 90 years if you're pushing your speed up. But if, you can do like I said, I think it would be like, I want to say, yeah, I got to check the numbers on that. But let's move on. Next question. Conspiracies do need to be exposed. Area 51 may have simply been a place to test out the stealth fighter amongst other aircraft. It might be there to sidetrack, but the JFK one, let me tell you what I know about the JFK one, what little I know about JFK. Dude, apparently they were supposed to like release documents like multiple freaking times for JFK. And each time they keep extending it. And so it's like last time I think they extended it for like another like 50 years or some crazy shit. Some insane shit, because like basically the problem was probably, my guess is, whoever was involved in the JFK assassination is still alive. So until everyone who is involved or remotely involved is dead, that shit is not seeing the light of day. And even like September 11th, because like as a New Yorker, it's like, yeah, obviously I don't think the buildings were hit by holographic planes. I think planes hit the buildings. I would even buy the idea that the first two buildings collapsed because of the jet fuel weakening the beams. But that third building, it seems to be shaky, you know, like why that one collapsed. And so one of the reasons that, like, I heard, well, we'll get to that in a moment. If anybody's curious, I'll give my speculation on Building 7. Moving on. Red flag operations and false flag operations are part of the lore of UFOs. Or unless you meant red flag operations, are part of the lore of UFOs. Has been since the beginning. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, right? I agree, Archer, by the way. You said Pentagon whistleblowers would be assassinated in your opinion. I agree with that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they'd be assassinated or at least given a hard time. Or if they're allowed to speak, it's because they don't really have anything worth, you know, speaking. Or they've been, you know, fed a narrative. They've been... You know, like this stories like the Bob Lazar thing, that he might have been tricked into seeing something that wasn't real, or, you know, that he may genuinely think he saw something worthwhile and may have been put in a position to see that thing, that it wasn't necessarily an accident. He saw what he saw, and, you know, this narrative is he's being honest, but there's more to it. It's also possible that he's a fraud. I don't really know much about Bob Lazar, but I do know he has a Camaro or a Corvette that runs on hydrogen, and I thought that was a cool project. And yeah, there might be a financial benefit to hiding aliens. Once again, I think it's possible that they literally don't have evidence of aliens at all. And if anything that they do in the coming years to disclose aliens, I would take that with a grain of salt. I'd say don't assume that everything's a conspiracy, but at the same time, be open to that possibility. Be open to the idea that something being presented as proof of aliens may be sheer misdirection, unless, you know, you see something truly convincing. Now, the other reason why the government would want to lie about aliens right now, the reason they'd want to lie about UFOs, is potentially really simple. Imagine if you have secret aircraft that can hover like the DeLorean, you know, anti-gravity technology, like the DeLorean and Back to the Future 2, or what we call room temperature superconductors. So basically, a superconducting magnet, or a superconductor, like a magnet that is superconducting, you could take two opposing magnetic fields, and if you ever took two strong magnets and made them repel, you'd notice that they sort of like always like fight each other, and they never stay in one place. You can never get the magnet to stay in one place. But if you take those magnets and you freeze them like with liquid nitrogen, then you put the magnets opposing each other next to each other, the magnet will lock into place. It will, you can look up videos of this, it will stay. Without electricity, it'll act like a hover train. It'll do all of the proper stuff. And that's basically called quantum locking. Basically, you freeze something, getting rid of that heat resistance, that electrical resistance, that electromagnetic resistance helps to create that locking magnetic field effect. And so now, you can't use the Earth's magnetic field to create a hoverboard, but if you had something like a room temperature superconductor, a superconductor that did not need to be frozen, you'd be closer to that capability. And another benefit to superconductors is that you can transmit electricity around the world without losing any energy. Whereas right now, power transmission lines, you have to use really high voltages to prevent power loss. And if you go over a long enough distance, you still waste like a meaningful percentage of electricity, to the point that like you can't put solar panels in a desert and send electricity to Texas. You can't put solar panels in the desert and send electricity over long distances. You couldn't get the voltages high enough to like transmit it without losing all of it before it got to the destination. And so yeah, you know, bottom line is that if you had craft that can hover like that, you know, these superconducting hovercraft, and you got caught, your organization, your company, your group, whatever it was, got caught hiding that shit for decades from the public, there would be hell to pay. Because here we are, we got these some of them are bitches and some of them are deceived. You got bitch ass motherfuckers and you got deceived individuals who genuinely mean well, who think that climate change is this big existential crisis, and are fixated on carbon, and somehow think that like electric cars are better than using internal combustion vehicles, but then you're still going to draw your electricity from a power grid that mostly generates electricity from natural gas and all of that, which is really, you know, a bigger producer of carbon output than the actual cars. And I'm not even going to say that carbon doesn't have any effect. It's just that, like, the way that they're treating this and the way that every time there's a big storm, you know, it's okay for someone in the news or some individual to say, this massive storm is because of climate change, and the storms are only going to get worse because of climate change. And basically they're appealing to your individual selfishness. You're saying, shit, I don't want my house getting flooded, I better get off this stupid climate change narrative, you know? And so people act like they're being all altruistic, but of course half of them are feeding into the appeal to their respective selfishness. Others are in on, you know, the scam. You know, I think there's definitely like that ESG thing, for example, basically like pushing your identity politics by having that environmental motive. You're really, you know, getting multiple things. You're getting your Marxism in there, you know, but getting away from that, my point is that you got people saying that our civilization right now, our jet fuel is causing climate change, and this is terrible. And if we find out there's like some technology that doesn't require jet fuel to make a plane fly really efficiently without using lots and lots of fuel, like it can hover and fly and not run, like, you know, not guzzle fuel, and that shit's being kept from the, you know, from the public, that's a big fucking deal. You know, I mean, hell, you get that technology, you could build a space elevator, you could build something to get things into orbit so that we could colonize space. Because, like, part of the reason you might not want us to have that technology is because you don't want people, you know, spreading out and procreating so much to the point that we genuinely do strain the earth. I mean, our biggest danger to the earth is how we treat the ocean. The way we're hell-bent on toxifying the ocean is like a bigger deal than this climate change shit. And so, yeah, that's why I think the, you know, alien angle is potentially being pushed. I don't really know, but I'm open to that possibility that things are being withheld from the general public that could have a positive effect on society, but at the same time, you know, maybe there's not a desire to deal with the implications, the baggage that would come with that release. Moving on. Good question here about light speed. So first, let me just make sure. Stephen Ransom said, if they travel using anything we have thought of, even in fiction. Yeah, you know, and there's another thing. If there are alien craft that have made it here, it's not something I would rule out that, you know, agreements could have been entered into with these extraterrestrials. I mean, there's some cool stuff which I would still treat like an entertaining fictitious story. Hell, Eisenhower's granddaughter, great-granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. I think she's Looney Tunes, but it still could be kind of entertaining if you want to go down that rabbit hole. And basically there's like this narrative that, you know, President Eisenhower and the Pentagon dealt with these Greys, or this guy named Thor, just like Stargate SG-1, and there was some kind of deal entered into. And one interesting thing about Eisenhower was, during, you know, the nuclear era, he was concerned that if we got nuked, you would need to have emergency powers. You need to have a continuity of government, a way to keep the government running if shit hit the fan bad. And unfortunately, that mechanism may have been put into place by him, and he may have made a mistake and realized it afterwards that he created a mechanism where, you know, power could be hijacked. And you got to remember Eisenhower's farewell address when he said, beware of the beware of power, whether, well, let me phrase it. He said something along the lines of, beware of expansion of power by the military-industrial complex, whether sought or intentionally or not. There was this concern he was trying to express about, you know, this military-industrial complex gaining too much power, more than it should, unelected power in not only, some say that we don't have a democracy, but I'd say if it quacks like a duck, I'm not saying I like it. Democracy is mob rule, but yeah, we effectively, in a lot of cities, a lot of municipalities have a democracy. But in a Republican democracy, in a representative democracy, whatever the fuck anyone wants to call it, it's not supposed to work like that. You're not supposed to have, that situation that Eisenhower was warning us about. And so he may realize he opened a can of worms by accident or contributed to it, and he was trying to give us a heads up. And Kennedy may have been potentially trying to also deal with that. So that might contribute to why he was shot. And unfortunately, those files be covered for a while. Moving on. Pentagon whistleblowers. I think I said that before. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyway, this was the question that I thought was good. From Archer. Isn't the light speed spacecraft a scientifically impossible technology? Yes, correct. And basically, as we know it's impossible, that's why when, that Pentagon whistleblower goes, that so-called whistleblower claims that these are ET craft, it's like, it opens up a whole can of worms that this is possible, that a whole bunch of other things are possible. It's like, well, I'm going to need some other evidence before I buy into that whole rabbit hole narrative there, but would be cool. This is not to say that it's completely off the table, even though, you gotta remember, during the age of sail, people never thought you'd cross the ocean quicker than, whatever people were doing, right? But if I go here, we look up the Casimir effect. Basically, this is a cool experiment. What happened was, in a lab, they take two plates and they put them really close. Now, these plates are I think almost micrometers or nanometers apart. But the point is that you have two plates and there's a space between these two plates. And by applying a magnetic field, and there's also, it should be noted that these two plates are rigidly mounted. Okay, they do not bend, they do not flex, they are very rigidly mounted. So if you took a ruler and measured the distance between them, or measured whatever mounting bracket was holding them together, it cannot move, it's not budging. That thing is completely solid and stationary. But somehow they were able to figure out that when applying a magnetic field, that the distance between the two plates shrinks due to the magnetic field. And this is not a magnetic field that has the strength to necessarily pull them together, but it's just some weird property of space. And when we talk about space, you can't talk about space without talking about time. And, this is time is the reason why we think that faster than light travel is impossible, or why it's believed at the moment. But yeah, look up the Casimir effect if you want to get into the weeds on that. But I think this has potential toward giving us something akin to warp drive at some point in the far, far future. I don't think we're going to have it too soon, but this has the potential. Right now, our best hopes of colonization are generational ships and just finding ways to shield a ship from debris and just using nuclear rockets to get to high speeds. Now, one cool property about space is space-time. The closer to the speed of light you go, the slower time goes, right? We got time dilation. So if I do time dilation and I get you a graph maybe, and you could even look up a calculator. Let's see if we could get a good graph. That's an itty bitty graph, but we'll use it. So basically 1 is the speed of light, and we're usually going at a sub fraction of the speed of light. But as you go in orbit of the Earth in the space station, they took a pair of twins and measured proteins in their bodies and were able to figure out that one of them aged slower than the other. So now let's say you go 80% of the speed of light. Still not breaking laws of physics, but time does go slower for the person in the craft, so they're not going to sense time going slower. But if I leave Earth going 80% the speed of light, and then I come back to Earth, if I leave Earth for say 10 years, when I come back, maybe 12 years passes by on Earth, maybe 15 years passes by on Earth, and you can see the graph gets really steep as we get to this end part here. So at that point, you got a significant time dilation factor. So if I'm reading this correctly, at 90% the speed of light, 10 years on Earth would be 20 years. And if we're going 95% the speed of light, we're now talking almost 40 years for every 10 years that I'm traveling at that speed. And I'm just giving a rough estimate. If we want, I could do a time dilation calculator and see if we can, like, run a quick numerical number here. So time interval, and we're going to do years. And we're going to do 10 years. And I guess, like, right now, what is the speed of light in kilometers a second? I think it's going to be, okay, so that's like 299 meters a second. So we could do, like, basically 29979 whatever, right? And let's see here. Good, I can do speed of light. So if I do, what did I say? What did I say before in the graph? 90% the speed of light. So 0.9 speed of light. We change it to years. 22 years. So 10 years at 90% the speed of light. 10 years on the spaceship. If you come back in 10 years, now of course you wouldn't spend the whole time traveling at the speed of light. You'd have to turn around and slow it down. But let's say you could manage it. 20 years pass by on Earth. So the problem is, what does this imply? And we know this works. We actually know this works. There's experimental evidence this happens. This is a thing. So what does that mean? Well, that means that when you do exceed the speed of light, something has to budge. Do you go backwards in time when you exceed the speed of light? And if you can't go backwards in time, then you can't go faster than light. And that's where the other idea is that Stephen Ransom brought up, quantum superposition, which is a thing, spooky action at a distance. And I don't fully understand it, but essentially it appeared to have potential for faster than light communication at the very least. The problem with it was you'd have to have two entangled electrons or something, right? And so you'd have like one electron with a spin, like, let's say, like this. Then you have another electron that is entangled with that electron. So this one's spinning like this. But whenever I spin this one like this one spins like this. Something like that. They're not exactly spinning together. They're not both spinning horizontally. They're doing something different. But the point is that when this does this, this one does something. And when this one does something, this one does something. And so hypothetically, you would think that there would be a way to, like, exploit that, right? If this does something and this does something and it does it, like, instantly. Like, I'm talking no matter how far away these two electrons are apart. When you do something to this one, the other one does this. The problem is, like, to even know it's working, you have to have a guy with a telephone or a radio on this side and a guy with a radio on this side. And when he touches the electron, he says, hey, I made the electron spin. He's got to call the guy on a normal speed of light communications line to check if the change happened. And so it doesn't seem like any practical way to take this on a spacecraft and be able to be certain that when you change this is going to reliably do what you want it to do, so that you can use it to tap out Morse code. I hope that changes, but as I understand it, there's like a problem where once you do the interaction, they become detangled. So they're entangled until they're not. And then at that point, it's like, well, you need a new pair of electrons. And so it's like, yeah, that's like the rough sketch understanding that I have on that one. And at this point, I say, who cares about aliens, as Stephen Ransom says, about U.S. mining asteroids? I'm thinking about the U.S. mining asteroids and finding worlds in the Oort cloud. Human spacefaring. You're absolutely right, Stephen Ransom. Because, like, we can do that. That's attainable. You know what I mean? Like a friend of mine argues that Elon should not be, let me phrase it. A friend of mine argues that Elon should not be pushing this Mars thing as hard, but should be prioritizing asteroid mining. A nearby asteroid, perhaps. Even the moon thing, like, putting effort in the moon. I'm thinking that maybe, I have a couple of theories with Elon. Maybe he just feels that if he doesn't do it now, it'll never happen. And I could respect that. The other theory is maybe he's shooting for Mars, and if you shoot for Mars and you fail, you'll at least reach the moon and the asteroid belt. But the asteroid belt, you can, essentially, like a friend of mine put that in the expanse, the people in the belt should actually have the nicest civilization. Earth or Mars should be the backwater. Mars should be the backwater. The belt should have like the best universities, the best construction yards. They should not be like downtrodden like they are on the show. And I mean, you know, I can see ways that could go wrong, but I think there's a case to be made there because, like, despite the material, you know, resources of the Earth, you know what I mean? You don't have to get things into orbit, right? You're already in space. Same thing with the moon. You can build things on the moon. You can take asteroid mining, send objects to the moon, and use a space gun, basically, as a big honking space gun, as Jack O'Neill would say. And you can use that to get things on and off of the moon, basically. So, you know, there are practical ways to use, like, electricity. Like, you know, you want to talk about solar panels that would work? Put them on the moon. And you can use that to power something that takes things into orbit. You don't even need necessarily rocket fuel to make that happen. And I'd say if there are aliens, we'll find some ruins. We'll find something in due time. But right now, let's just, like you said, you know, focus on colonizing. Look, something could wipe out the Earth in an instant. It may not happen right away. It could be a gamma ray burst. We might get a gamma ray burst that hits the edge of the Earth on the side. And we might get skinned by it in such a way that one side of the Earth gets, like, you know, everyone dies on one side of the Earth and the other side of the Earth is alive. Now, you would have a problem where there would be a shit ton of dead organisms that wouldn't rot in the normal way. They would take a longer time to rot slowly. That could be a bit of an environmental catastrophe on its own. Hopefully it would happen to the other side of the world, not our side of the world, but, you know, still, you'd have a bit to deal with right there. The ocean organisms would potentially be safe from that if it was skinning the Earth. The spacesuits the spacesuits needs to evolve. Our bodies don't stay healthy at different gravities. Well, let me introduce you to my friends, the Ousters. So in a science fiction series called The Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, the Ousters decided instead of adapting planets, instead of terraforming, they would gene tailor their bodies, they would adapt their bodies, they would build suits and technology so that they could adapt to different environments. Now, they come in many varieties. At one point there was a war and they come down in these battle suits, but they might have been instigated. But then there's also these beautiful Ousters who are practically like angels, and essentially they have these wings that they use in a manner like solar sails to basically fly on currents in a solar system. Of course, their body is better able to deal with the radiation. And although the pictures from the books don't always do justice to, you know, depicting what these guys look like, that's not one of them, but, you know, it gives you an idea. So one group of Ousters is a group that can live in the atmospheres of gas giants. They can fly on, like, lifting gas. And so, yeah, them guys are cool. But with that, the only other final thought I would add, because I know you got to split, I got to split too, is that, interesting. Well, I think we got to touch base on it. We might want to have, like, a conversation about this sometime, Steven, and, you know, I would hope maybe even if Archer could drop by, or if he wants to just join the chat, you know, he's welcome in either case. But, like you said, Mars is a show that will finance the rest, like NASA and the ballistic missile. That's a very interesting notion. I could totally buy that. Yeah, I could live with that. Yeah, you know. So with that said, thank you for tuning in. I hope I was able to share thoughts without my mind meandering too much, without me getting too sidetracked. I definitely did go on a bit of a ramble. I would love to get a little bit more, you know, mentally organized to be able to share my thoughts on these in a more concise manner. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak about that with you guys today. Alrighty, now let's get this into the wrap-up phase. This is that galaxy in the hydrogen filter, and unfortunately, just a lot of shit in the air right now. I think a lot of humidity buildup. I don't think it's going to be easy to see what we want to see right now, so we're going to move on to a different target, and I think I had one, but what was that called? The Spiral Galaxy or the Whirlpool Galaxy? I think it was the Pinwheel. Yeah, it's the Pinwheel Galaxy. But based on atmospherics, I don't think I'm going to get really great pictures of any of this, but to be fair, this is low in declination. This is a little bit higher in declination. If I can get like a nice star cluster, I would love to get a star cluster. I really would. I just looked at that. I pressed a hotkey to see these stupid constellations, and I don't even know how I did it. There we go. Okay, so that's the North America Nebula, but that's pretty low in the northeastern sky. But we do have a significant chunk of the Milky Way up here that we could try to aim at. Maybe find like a nice nebula or something. Like the Crescent Nebula is this smallish thing here, but it's got like a nice little C shape. But where the action is at is usually in these areas here. You got nebula here. And a nebula here. Now what time does sunrise? We basically got barely an hour here. So I can either keep focusing on this target, which is getting pretty bad, or pick a new target. I'd say I'm probably going to call it a night tonight and hope I got good data to process, because I don't really feel like, you know, going crazy. If anything, maybe what I should do is at least try to capture the pinwheel in hydrogen. So now the telescope is going to aim at a new target. But the caveat is you're not going to see it. Nobody's going to see it because it's going to take a little processing time to get this. All right, let's get ready for bed. Well, if the software crashed on me, I'm definitely done with it. Who am I kidding? I'll just reopen it. Oh, it looks like I gotta reconnect the USB cable to my power supply box. I can't control the heating units if I wanted to. plate solving completed. Our reticle did not drift. Oh wait, it did drift quite a bit. So we're going to recenter the target. We're going to pray that it's on target. We're going to get a test exposure and see if we see any evidence of a galaxy. Go forth and exercise. Alright, let's see here. Yeah, I see like a spot in the middle there. It looks like a galaxy. So we're going to take it and we're going to pick a guide star. We're going to pick this one here. Maybe this one here. Maybe that one there. That one looks nice. Alright, good. We lock on to target. Now we're going to go back here and we're going to instruct the mount to take pictures in hydrogen. This will give us our best odds of blocking out the light pollution and what have you. Plus the moon was starting to rise, so if the sun doesn't get me, the moon will get me first. There we go, and this is going to take 10 minutes to get the first picture, so we're going to end this stream. I'll be back tomorrow, most likely, so that I can play some Star Trek on stream. But we are also going to I am also possibly going to see the Super Mario Brothers movie tomorrow. I'm just going to kind of wing it, you know. I'm not 100% if I'm going to definitely see it, but most, like, you know, it's like I got plans on Friday that preclude me being able to really, you know, to like see it on Friday. So if I can't see the movie on Friday, I'm going to need to see it on tomorrow, because Saturdays I'm depressed. On Saturdays I got to go back to work on Sunday, right? So I'm always depressed on Saturday about how I got to go back to work. I mean, I'm not profoundly depressed, but I'm like, you know, I'm in a salty mood. I'm like, you know, I don't want to do half of anything that day. Now, it should be noted real quick that the position of the telescope is good, because there are times where if the telescope was facing the other direction, the camera could bump into the mount as it tracks west. But in this situation, it'll eventually get to a point where this will be facing east and it'll be at the horizon and it'll just stop moving. But that'll serve a dual purpose. One, there's no chance in the morning or the afternoon that the sun will accidentally hit the lens. So that's good. And two, as long as it does its proper, you know, pause, which it should do, nothing will get stuck in the wrong position, and then I could park it in the home position. Now, there is a spider web here. I'll have to clean that spider web off my camera tomorrow, or at least rehome that spider. But I think it is literally, I hope it's not building a web right now. Anyway, whatever. So there's a spider web. But yeah, with that, I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave a comment. Perhaps we'll talk more aliens in space another time, although I am profoundly ignorant on certain facets of the overall topic. There are other facets that I do feel I am sufficiently qualified to, delve into and to speculate upon. And so, yeah, perhaps that is something we can do more of on this channel. But with that said, I want to thank Stephen Ransom and Archers and April's Alien April Ape Adventure. It's a mouthful. Copy and paste the name. For tuning in, and if nothing else, do check out Action Man Gaming. If you're a man of action, or if you're able to respect a man of action, I definitely recommend checking out Action Man Gaming. Of course, I can give you a whole list of channels. I really got to update my homepage to have like links to channels of people who are cool. But without further ado, we shall now end this stream. So once again, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment. And for now, we shall end transmission as soon as I click here. That didn't work, did it? End transmission on my mark. Okay, that doesn't work. See,